Excerpts from Isaiah. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in a land of darkness, on them the light has shined. God, you have multiplied the nation and increased its joy. For you have broken the yoke of their burdens and liberated them from their oppressors. For a child has been born to us, and this child shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty and Holy One, Everlasting Creator, Bringer of Peace.
Good morning. It's always a pleasure to lead worship here, and particularly this morning when we have youth sharing in worship leadership. So I thank you, Jack, and thank you, Chloe. I guess she's already gone to help with her mom with the children. Anyway, it's just wonderful to have you doing that. So I thought a bit of background before Nell reads the story from Matthew. So you all know that the stories we traditionally hear on Christmas Eve are compilations of Matthew and Luke's gospel, because there's no one gospel that has angels and shepherds and magi and all that stuff. In fact, Mark and John don't have any infancy stories at all. The birth and infancy stories in Matthew and Luke were composed late in the first century or early in the second century by faith communities wanting to connect Jesus to the prophecies of the Hebrew Testament and intending to show how unique Jesus was. The writers were aware that in that time, birth stories of very famous people had these sorts of miraculous births and maybe angels and all those things happening around to show how important they were. So the gospel writers set the backstory of Jesus in that tradition. And the early followers of Jesus would have understood these stories that were not intended to be historically or factually accurate, but profoundly theological and spiritually significant. So today, I decided to focus on the story in Matthew for a couple of reasons. I think Joseph doesn't get much time in the limelight, and he's kind of a cool guy. And also, this journey metaphor is very applicable to so many people today, fleeing persecution and violence all over the world. So we have a map. I thought it'd be fun to just see the map. So if you look on the north is Nazareth, and that's where, according to the story, Jesus and Mary would have traveled down to Bethlehem, which would have been 70 to 90 miles, depending. Then the Magi stopped in Jerusalem, you can see right there. And Bethlehem is only about 5 or 6 miles south of Jerusalem. So you can understand why Herod, the king, would have gotten antsy if the Magi were talking about a baby king being born, because that's very close to where his area is. And the distance of the flight from Egypt depends. Well, did they take a trade route to Alexandria? Or did they go to a port city and get a boat and go down? How far into Egypt did they go? We don't have any of that information at all in the legend. But as Nell reads the story, please imagine yourself as Mary and Joseph going on a risky journey. Imagine yourself as a gospel author. What spiritual insight would have led you to compose this story?
Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, verses 13 to 23. Now, after they had left, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child and destroy him." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother by night, and went to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken of by the Lord, "Out of Egypt I have called my son." When Herod saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, he was infuriated, and he sent and killed all the children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years or under, according to the time that he had learned from the wise men. Then it was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, wailing and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be consoled because they are no more. When Herod died, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared in a dream to Joseph and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother to the land of Israel, for those who were seeking the child's life are dead." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was ruling over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And after being warned in a dream, he went away to the district of Galilee. There he made his home in a town called Nazareth, so that what had been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. He will be called a Nazarene.
Please pray with me. As we reflect upon these stories today, we ask, O God of light and justice and peace, that you would inform our hearts and our actions, that we could be bringers of peace. Amen. So in both history and literature, there are many journey stories. You know, in high school or grade school maybe, you had to read the Odyssey, you had to read the Divine Comedy. Maybe at some point later you read Nora Zeal Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. There are all kinds of stories. Archetypal stories can help illuminate our own journeys, physical, emotional, and spiritual. So think of today's story in that way. So Joseph has this dream or this intuition. The baby's in danger. He's got to jump up, and he and Mary have to run off and take Jesus away in the darkest of the night on this really hard journey. Maybe Mary's riding a donkey. If you think about the story, would she want to go somewhere shortly after giving birth with the baby? Well, maybe not so much. But Joseph's action was because of the immediate felt danger to the baby, that if they didn't flee, this precious child might be killed. So doesn't that call to mind a lot of journeys in our contemporary world? Parents in Gaza fleeing with their children for safety, for food, for medical attention. Journeys of desperate people attempting to cross the U.S. southern border to find asylum. Families in Haiti or South Sudan fleeing starvation or violence. So we've all seen pictures, we've heard all the stories. I don't need to elaborate anymore today. But the pain of these journeys seems so overwhelming that even to imagine it breaks our hearts. And we wonder, how do those people have the courage and persistence to make these journeys? So think about Mary and Joseph. Imagine them as real people, not Bible characters. They must have been terrified. Joseph probably had trouble convincing Mary they really needed to go right now. Then they walked, they started out. Did they get help along the way? Did they get frightened? Did they think about quitting? Did they argue about when to stop and rest? Did they argue about the best route? Because that's kind of the human experience, isn't it? So how many of you have ever been on a road trip before GPS? You end up in a traffic jam or lost, and you disagree about how to proceed. I remember a trip Michael and I took, and he told me I could use this story. Anyway, we're going from Vancouver, BC to Whistler, and there's one route through the Lions Gate Bridge. It was rush hour on a Friday evening. Mike has unending patience when it comes to making little train things, but in traffic, not so much. So we're there in this long line of traffic, and he says, there must be a faster way. And I say, well, if there were a faster way, all these cars wouldn't be sitting here in this jam, right? And he says, no, I'll just turn here. There has to be a shortcut. This ever happened? Yes. So after a long time and many, many turns, even Mike admits we're lost. We pull into a convenience store lot and get out the paper map. Do you remember those maps? Jack, you're too young. They never fold back the way they're supposed to, and they're all just a mess. Anyway, so we spread it over the steering wheel. We're looking. Where are we now? Where do we have to be? How do we get there? And then, no kidding, a miracle occurs. A woman in a little red car stops and knocks on our window and said, "Do you need help?" "Yes, we do need help." And she said, "So you need directions?" And we're, "Yes, this is where we're supposed to go." And she goes, "Oh, easy. You follow me. I'm going that way. At a certain point, I'll turn left. You just keep going straight and you'll be right there." Wonderful. We all need help on our journeys sometimes. So traffic jams are a pretty minor inconvenience in the span of a lifetime, not at all comparable to refugees around the world. What keeps them going? What kept Mary and Joseph going? What I love about this story is its ordinariness, its everydayness. There wasn't any big band of angels that airlifted them into Egypt. There wasn't even any extraordinary light that they were supposed to follow. They just kept plodding ahead, one foot after another, step by step, even when they were tired, frustrated, and maybe feeling lost. They kept going, not for their sake, but for the sake of this baby that they had to protect. And I suspect that's what keeps most refugees going. Through the darkness of night, the darkness caused by artillery bombardments, thirst, hunger, fear, they probably think every mile is going to be a new danger, but they keep going for the love of their children, their families, hope for a better day for their country. They're desperate. As one Somali refugee says, "No one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land." There has to be desperation. So how can we live in a world of such journeys, of such darkness? The words of Isaiah ring true, I think. Isaiah was writing to a people who had been very marginalized, hoping for some light of freedom. And I think his words resonate with us today, all who live under a cloud of gloom or darkness. And whether folks have ever heard that reading or not, whether they're Jewish, Christian, Buddhist, Baha'i, humanist, there's something in the human psyche and soul that tells us in the midst of the darkest night, there is a light. And it might not be a great light, it might be a little glimmer of light. The Spirit of the creative and loving God, by whatever name we call that reality, continues to offer us light and hope, even in those very dark times. Because without that glimmer of light, it seems impossible. So many people could continue the horrific journeys that they make every day. And I think glimmers of light are all around us. There are people who hand out water and sandwiches in the desert of people trying to come into the U.S. from the southern border. There are humanitarian workers in Gaza. There are people who speak out against domestic abuse or sexual abuse. There are people every day who risk their comfort and livelihood to help others along their journeys. So what of us in our journeys? I don't want to trivialize the dangerous, desperate journeys of refugees or immigrants, but we all have our own challenges. There are journeys we need to make to free ourselves from addictions or a sense of terrible self-worth from traumatic childhoods, maybe from physical pain, loss of loved ones, journeys that make us want to flee the pain of a divided country, from fears of climate change. And along our life journey, I think we sometimes can lose sight of the light. It seems too scary and hard, and we want to give up because we're all human. So sometimes we just need to sit by the roadside and cry and allow ourselves to feel despondent and discouraged. But then it's time to pick ourselves up and move on. We do it for our children, for ourselves, for our communities, for the future. And we do it because we're called to carry the light for others. So maybe a question for each of us to sit with a bit today. What is your particular journey? What is compelling you to leave some comfort zone and move ahead into something unknown or scary? What motivates you to face the darkness and not only believe in the light, but carry the light for others? Is it to protect and support someone through physical or emotional pain? Is it to be part of a movement for peace and justice, to ensure democracy, to try to heal divisions by listening with an open mind to someone you disagree with? Would the light you carry take you to participate in the church's sanctuary program, immigrant justice movement? Get involved with the children and youth program? To participate in peace and justice or interfaith work in your neighborhood? Pushing yourself beyond your comfort level in a small or large way can carry the light for others. I was struck by a quote from Dina Nayeri, author and refugee, and she says, "It is the obligation of every person born in a safer room to open the door when someone in danger knocks." Now, perhaps we can't open the doors physically, all of us, but we can open our hearts to people fleeing violence. You know, and sometimes people say, well, I'm not really good enough or worthwhile enough to do that kind of stuff, because we are, most of us at times, grumpy, selfish, judgmental, confused. Are you not? Only me? Okay. But even so, we can be a light for others. We can reflect the light of God. And sometimes, in spite of ourselves, we do it. And we're fortunate because we don't journey alone. Along the way on our journey, we find kindred spirits, reasons to laugh and dance and celebrate even in the midst of fear. Because if we can't celebrate in gratitude, we will not lightly keep going. The story of our journey into Egypt is that story of all of us. Roused out of a sleep, warned about the dangers to our community, our kids, our political or cultural values, to the fate of the earth. And whether we're sleep deprived or have a GPS or not, we go ahead into the darkness. And we believe in our deepest core that we will see a light, and we will find kindred spirits to journey with us who will lessen the pain and increase the joy. And I think that's what the church community offers us. We are very fortunate. We don't make these journeys alone. And we're not held responsible even for the outcome, only for our part in the process. So I'm going to take just a teeny little silent time to think about, where's the light you see in your world, and what is the light you are called to carry? And I'll close with a few words from a favorite hymn by Ruth Duck. Lead on, O God of freedom, and guide us on our way, and help us to trust the promise through struggle and delay. We're not lost, though wandering, for by your light we come, and we are still God's people. The journey is our home, so be it. And let's stand and sing.